Hey guys, I'm LaKrista with Unscripted, where we're breaking the system, finding root causes, and exposing the lies you've been prescribed. Let's jump in. Hey everyone, welcome back. Today I'm here with Shayne with Systemic Formulas, and we are going to talk about the microbiome. But first, I'll have you kind of tell us a little bit about Systemic Formulas and kind of how y'all are different.
Yeah, fantastic. Thanks for being here. I'm excited. Yeah, we'll get into some fun stuff, nerdy stuff. But Systemic Formulas, it's a generational company, right? It's a legacy. We started, in fact, my grandfather started its predecessor in the late 60s, early 70s.
So what was it called before?
Life Centers.
Okay.
Yeah, and then that became Systemic Formulas in '84. I started in the industry or in the company in '84 as a kid doing manufacturing. And of course, then it
old were you?
evolved. I was 15.
I figured you were
Yeah.
like really young.
Yeah, after school projects. Yeah, it was fun. Then after that, of course, we developed more and more tools based on a lot of his travels. He was an ethno-medicinal person or ethnobotanist, and so he would go around the world looking for solutions. Whether they be anti-parasitic or whether they be just nutritive. But he brought together all of the herbal, herbal intellectual property that we have in the Systemic Formulas. I went on to do a lot of schooling and a lot of other things to add to Systemic, and that was really born out in a product line that we call Alimentum. It's more evidence-based, so we've included in that a lot of the research that's been done in the last few decades around our genetics, our nutrient needs, our toxin exposures that we didn't have 50, 60 years ago till the advent of plastic and the like.
Oh, yeah.
And then, of course, really the most exciting part has been the discovery of a new organ called the microbiome and how it plays a role in everything that we are facing in terms of the chronic diseases, right? The things that are preventable, things that didn't exist and don't exist in cultures that don't live the Western lifestyle. I mean,
Yeah.
You go other places, they don't have heart disease, diabetes, neurological issues. They still live a lifestyle that doesn't contribute to this. The microbiome is central to that.
So I read a study one time and they said the microbiome is like 70 to 80% like locked in by the time you're like 3. And that you can shift it a little bit, but like your actual microbiome, that's why it's so important for like babies to be breastfed. And then of course all these childhood shots are causing issues with the microbiome and all the rounds of antibiotics all the kids are taking. But what are your thoughts on that?
And I've read the same studies, and of course, because it's such a new field, it's dynamically changing, right? The information coming out of this field, it's attracted. We started the microbiome research in our sister lab, Nutribiome, back in 2009, and there are other groups like a group at Harvard, Stanford, UC Davis. They're all publishing great data, and the early data, like Marshall's lab and Knight's lab, showed that because we were looking at, when you think about the microbiome studies, they're being done on people in the United States and Europe, until they started looking at cultures that aren't in the United States or living our Western lifestyle or Western exposure, and they started seeing
Like
a
blue
huge
zones
shift.
and...
Yes, that shift was enormous. So if you look at the Amerasians down in the Amazon or tribes down in Africa, they have 14 times the diversity of microbes in their gut than Western people.
Even
14 times.
Like even when they're born? Like even when kids are born here?
That's actually, they do have a different diversity when they're born.
Okay.
Because mom had a different diversity.
Okay.
And mom contributes significantly to the microbiome early on, breastfeeding. You deliver microbes through your breast milk to the baby.
And I read a study too that say, I breastfed my kids, but I wasn't breastfed. So that affects what I'm able to give them. And so each generation
is losing
yes,
it's true. And so back to your first study, yes, there appears to be what is a stable microbiome, and then there's this flexible or plastic microbiome above that.
Okay.
Now that's a debatable number, and that's slowly being eroded, however, that hypothesis and what the data is, because again, we're looking at Western people who have a already less diverse microbiome. So we went from if you go to our the people in Amerasia, and they have it. Why did we go from this hugely diverse one to people in the States that have a much lower diversity? That means that we have potential. Just right out of the gate, we know that we may not want the ones in Amerasia because they're fighting off a lot more parasites and things.
Yeah.
However, we want more diversity. That's part of it, and we want the right diversity. So I want you to think about. I'm going to air draw, but think of our microbiome as these troughs and valleys, valleys and hills, okay? Now, I'm going to do one on this side with a little hill. In the middle is where we are now.
Okay.
And then on the other side is where maybe we want to be, and if we go this direction, it's where we don't want to be. And what we're finding now is if you can deplete the microbiome and push it to a less diverse, but then as you rebuild it, if you simply go back to your same behaviors, your same lifestyle, your same dietary, and if we deplete it using natural products or even antibiotics, because it depletes the microbiome dramatically, and that's a bad thing. But if we do it on purpose, there's this resilience that you're talking about that they find that it doesn't change unless you force it to become better.
We call it the kill phase.
Most people don't force it. So when you take a general population, you say, hey, all these people had antibiotics. What does their microbiome look like? And let's measure it again later in 6 months and see what it looks like. And it looks just like it was before antibiotics.
So
but if you intervene and say, okay, we've depleted it using natural or otherwise, but we're going to build it back better. And how do we do that? Well, you can't just do it with strictly diet because you're missing these microbes. When I say that we're very different from a diverse one, part of that can be rebuilt by the diet because you're adding food for the microbes to recover, the good guys. Right? They're not the bad guys, the good guys to recover and grow in a harmonious ecology. But we have to add back other organisms. And how we do that was our research. We spent many, many years and many, many dollars to get these new microbes into what we call the eubiomic line. And then the food that feeds them, that's the superfoods. Adding those back brings back these, what we call extinction events. And in the United States and Europe, we have many, many extinction events, which brings us to your second question about moms. So 30% of Americans, and it might be even higher, no longer carry what we call Bifidobacterium infantis that first colonizes babies.
Is that where the immune eubiomic comes in?
And then we're coming out with a new kid one too.
Okay.
That is
We've just been opening the capsules.
Young people.
Yeah.
By the time they're 3, because they start into eating like adults, that's why that microbiome shifts so dramatically.
Okay.
It doesn't have to, but it does, because as soon as you start adding what mom and dad are eating,
processed food,
their microbiome is going to start looking like adult microbiomes. Now, my concern is, what is that adult microbiome look like? Is that a good one, or is that still not a good one? And for the vast majority of us, it's not good yet.
Yeah.
It still needs work, and that's why, and it has so many impacts, but building it back with adding new microbes and then feeding those microbes. If you, let's say as a clinician, you're working with somebody and you're getting good responses, your testing is paying off, they're getting better and better, and then they revert back to old behavior, they can ruin the work you've done within a week.
Oh, yeah.
Within a week, they can go back to.
Because
it's
January.
Is very resilient.
We're recovering from Thanksgiving and Christmas. Everybody came in feeling like crap the last 2 weeks.
And people don't realize that, our brain has a certain amount of plasticity, our heart, our lungs, our liver has the most, in many ways. But the microbiome is so plastic and so malleable that it'll go to where you don't want it to really quickly, within days. So if you throw somebody onto a carnivore diet, within days that microbiome is shifted to deal with meats and fats, to deal with protein and fats. Now, for some people that helps, right? It's a temporary benefit. For other people, it can be very dangerous, right? The amount of byproducts, depending on the bugs in your gut, you can actually be generating toxins from your diet that you aren't even aware of. And they've now been not linked, but causational to heart disease. So when you're on a high-fat, high-protein diet and you have the wrong organisms in your gut, you're literally making toxins and
so
setting
it's
them in your
not
bloodstream.
Necessarily in everybody, but genetically
it's not
in
everybody.
some people. Okay.
Yeah, those bugs, and we're now knowing what those bugs are, right? Certain bugs create toxins.
Well, and I tell everybody, like, it's not one diet. People say, what diet do you recommend? I'm like, it's different for everybody.
Absolutely. It's very personalized. And we use a little bit of genes to guide that. We use a lot of, like practitioner like yourself can use muscle testing. You can use intake information. What are they responded to? Are they allergic? And these things can help guide us. Mm-hmm. But in the end, we know what a good microbiome starts to look like. We're not even there yet, but we know what a better one looks like. So by using the tools, that makes the entire ethnobotanical or ethnomedicine world more effective. When you think about you have a patient that takes a certain phytochemical or an herb, and they go, oh, this made me feel so much better, and you're seeing it. But then their partner says nothing. Does nothing. A lot of that has to do with the microbiome because how it's metabolized.
I feel like men don't respond like women to things, but
they're not as interoceptive. They're not as innately listening to their body. Yeah, it's true.
Men are like, I take it, but I'm good.
Fine. Don't worry about it. I mean, it's true. We don't sit and listen to our body like whatever. It's fine.
Yeah. So on your research, we call it the kill phase. So we're going and killing out any of the bad candida, parasites, whatever. And then you've got to, seal up the gut and then add the good stuff back in.
Precisely.
So say someone goes through that, which is what we work them through when they're, and a lot of people do this on their own with protocols. Say they get through that, they rebuild their microbiome. As long as they continue, on a decent diet, do you feel like that's something in your research that shows they're able to maintain? Or because it wasn't locked in at a young age, do we have to continue to supplement that as an adult?
We have to continue to supplement it. And there's a couple of reasons. One, and I hate to say it because our goal is always to get people better and have them move on into their life thriving, right?
But we can't always reverse things that have been happening.
You can't always reverse, and some of that's genetic. So, for example, we have genes, especially women have genetics that attracts a certain microbiome. And if that doesn't happen when they're young, you have to work at it. And, case in point, I don't know, I've said this before in other talks, so you've heard this, but you have genes that produced breast milk. And those genes, when they produce these certain oligosaccharides, they don't make those for the baby. The baby gets no nutrient value out of that.
Really?
Those oligosaccharides made by your breast milk feed the early microbiome. That's its job.
Okay.
So you have genes dedicated to the microbiome, and you have others. There's some in your skin that attract certain microbes. There's some in your, in your urogenital tract, and even for fertility, there's a key component of when someone's incompatible, right? And and that's where that women listening to their bodies, and it's like if a woman kisses somebody, they're no, not happening. That's actually multiple systems saying you're not compatible.
Yeah.
Let's not continue down this road anymore.
There's the study on birth control where it messes with your pheromones. Uh-huh. So these women get married, they're on birth control, they come off birth control, and they're like, I don't like you anymore. So it's really crazy.
And there's a contributing factor from the microbiome for that. Smells come from a lot of the microbiome.
Yeah. So on the infant side, so I worked while I was in nursing school, actually I started in labor and delivery. Uh-huh. And this is kind of where my eyes were opened to, like, why are we intervening in something that's supposed to be natural?
So natural.
And I had a client just message me last week. She's fixing to have a baby and was like, did you bathe your kids right after they were born? I'm making my birth plan. What do you recommend? And I was like, my kids were almost a week old, because you just rub the vernix in and leave it until they...
Just lots of
It's not like they're sweating or doing anything. Yep. And so there was one doctor that, when I worked there, when we did a C-section, he would take gauze, put it in the vagina of the mom. Yeah. Once they were born, he would pull it out and just rub it all over the baby. And the nurses were just like horrified. Yeah. And he was like, this is going to save this baby's immune system, because if it's not going through picking up all of the, to build its microbiome, we've got to expose this baby. Yep. And the moms were always like, do it. But the nurses, we're all trained in Western medicine. We're like, this is weird. Everything's supposed to be sterile and clean. Right.
And that's contributed to this, the death of our microbiome, right? Yeah. The loss. I mean, we're having extinction.
We're having scheduled C-sections.
Yes.
Like, just because people don't want to go through labor. It was developed in
Rome, right, that technique. And Roman, the people in Rome, women even today, it's about a 90% C-section city.
That is wild.
They haven't figured out that process is what kickstarts the baby's microbiome, which kickstarts your immune system.
Well, it squeezes their lungs and clears it's just, God made it that way for a reason.
It's a very, very important part of entry into the world, for sure. And you're right. I mean, it's every animal that does it, there's such benefits from it. And C-sections, when you're born and if you have a C-section, the gut microbiome resembles mom's skin.
Okay.
It doesn't resemble mom's vaginal or gut microbiome, which is what it should, right out of the gate. Skin microbes don't metabolize breast milk very well.
What do you see as the increasing lactose intolerance issue? What do you think's the cause behind that?
All allergies can be linked back to these early events as well as later events. Some people that get allergies later.
Okay.
Your ability to recognize friend from foe, it's a multi-step process. But the first thing that happens is your exposure to a foreign material it has to go through the microbes, and then they have to talk to the immune system, and the immune system decides friend or foe. And that communication is happening a trillion times a day. So right now in your intestines, on your skin, in your urogenital tract, the immune system is sensing constantly what's going on microbially.
Yeah.
Whether or not there's any fungi, whether or not there's any parasite, right? That is a bidirectional communication, sending it from that area to the brain, through the afferent nerve, saying, okay, and it's all subconscious, here's what's going on, here's what's going on. Mm-hmm. And it's learning and it's being educated. So when you strip the world of these interactions through aseptic behavior, mm-hmm. through poor choices of not exposing, to natural, animals and friends and kisses and hugs with people, you're limiting the ability for the immune system to adapt. Now, you take a person that hasn't had this education on their immune system, you expose them to, a protein. And they also, that by the way, keeps your gut from not sealing well, right? The microbes keep the tight junctions in check. They open to allow your immune system to come out. Your immune system comes out, checks things out, goes back in, they close. That's a normal opening and closing of your intestinal lining is normal. Okay. But when they open and stay open, that's a problem. Now you have leaky gut.
So, talking about delivery, what are your thoughts on the Group B strep test and giving antibiotics during delivery? I mean, I have my own thoughts, but
we just had one. So we just had a clinician call me. She's pregnant. She's going in, and her physician said, "No, we want to just give it to you prophylactically." Mm-hmm. No. Yeah. You can do the little quick test. Yeah. And the test was negative. There is
so they're trying to give it to her without a test?
Just prophylactically.
Okay, so most of my clients go in at I think it's between 36 and 38 weeks, and they'll swab you, see if you're positive or negative. So I always try to get my clients to go in, get it done as early as they'll do it. Mm-hmm. That way if it's positive, then we do natural antibiotic supplements, and then I have them retest.
Yes.
If they do that, it's always clear. Yeah. And so it just makes me think, is it actually harmful? And I know a lot of people are Group B strep can cause, XYZ. And I'm when I was working labor and delivery, they just came in, they marked it on their chart, we hung the antibiotics. And of course we didn't know back then, if this has been 20 years ago, I had no idea. But now I'm we're wiping it out. Because of course it's crossing into the baby's
Absolutely.
Getting antibiotics, mm-hmm. just like they get, no one, what's crazy? I've talked to so many of my clients that do not know that when you take pain medication during labor and your baby's born, the respirations are low because narcotics mm-hmm. lower the respirations. And part of the protocol is to Narcan that baby. Oh. And their babies are getting this Narcan and they don't even know. The parents don't even know. The respirations are too low. You give them a shot of Narcan, perk them back up. And I'm you're Narcanning your baby within 30 seconds of life.
That's terrible. And that's where we have to be more involved in the process.
Yeah, parents don't have a clue.
Yeah, they have to be, what are you doing? Why are you doing that? Mm-hmm. I want to know, details. You have to be your own advocate. Yeah. Without question.
But if you take the pain meds and baby's born, there's not another option.
You've got to be an advocate for you and your family. You mama bear it or daddy bear it. You've got to be involved because there are procedures and protocols that are destructive for a lifetime. Yeah. They can be destructive for a lifetime. And so when it comes to babies, that strep B, for example, you're right, you can naturally deal with it. And the statistics, the actual mm-hmm. statistics of risk is actually quite low. Yeah. There's even some preeminent researchers in the microbiome who are MDs, by the way. And these are well-respected people that are saying, no more.
Well, and my
no more.
thought is, if the microbiome was more diverse, these babies could probably handle group
100%.
B strep a whole lot better.
100%.
You know, they're
We
not able
carry
to
it.
handle it
Yes.
because they don't have a microbiome to handle it.
Yeah, we had an event, and we're doing a new one this year at the end of the year, next gen, but one of them I had all the participants like yourself. I swabbed everybody coming into the building, and I grew what's in their nose.
I love
And
that.
30% of the room carried Staph aureus, but they're perfectly fine. You know why?
Yeah.
Because the microbiome keeps it in check.
We were talking about this the other day at like different conferences and events. I was like, these functional medicine events are the only place you go in and they'll hand you pills and people just take them and have no idea.
No questions
It's
asked.
like, hey, try this new thing, and we're just like,
We're going to get you addicted right out of the gate.
Right.
Yeah. I should try that.
yeah, like we're
but
developing
it's
something
true.
new. Just put them at everybody's table. There's like
Yeah.
3 pills and everybody just takes them. It's like,
It's fun because I love the tools that we have, in the systemic line, the binders and the antiparasitics and the antivirals and all those things. Love them, use them daily. But what I'm finding is without rebuilding this, what we call the gut x-axis now,
okay,
it's because most people think of probiotics and prebiotics as simply just good for the gut. And nothing could be further from the truth, right? This is where perhaps the most important aspect behind your immune system are the microbes. That's why it's a new organ. It's not just a collective ecology. Without it, your immune system is completely dysfunctional. Your tight junctions don't seal. And that's not just your gut, that's your skin and your neurological blood-brain barrier.
okay,
And that's why when you see people that have neurological issues like autism or any other cognitive, they always have gut issues, right? There's this connectedness.
that's what Andrew
and skin
Wakefield
issues.
identified initially.
Yeah,
That's how the whole MMR thing came up, because he was like, all these autistic kids that I'm seeing, because he's a gastroenterologist, they all have gut issues.
Yes.
And
Because of that, this bidirectional causes these kids and adults to start to focus on a very limited diet. Only certain things taste good. Only certain things become appealing, and that's because when you have you want a large ecosystem that's likened to the rainforest or a coral reef. When you shrink that down to just a small population, that population now dictates behavior, dictates immune system function, dictates pulmonary, right? So a lot of asthma is directly related to infant microbiomes. So if when they're born, if they get, like you say, a round of antibiotics and they don't recover to a healthy, first thing that happens is eczema, which is an overcolonization of staph on the skin.
Okay.
That's eczema. And that's been shown. You swab these.
That's how they're diagnosing, hey, it's eczema. Okay.
And it's just a Staph aureus, which is a toxic clever little bug, by the way. I mean, from a bug standpoint, he's clever. All kinds of. They actually release a compound that makes you itch. The bug does, and that's how it spreads. So it's quite clever. Yeah, it's designed to do what it does and then move on to someone else and do it, right?
So tell me about the new products that y'all have and the research and how these are working with
so
microbiome.
Going back, it's been quite a journey, and there's been,
because we've used the VRMs for a long time.
yeah, and still love them, and I partner them with what we call the clears. So like you mentioned, as we started our journey down this path to try to improve the efficacy of herbs, efficacy of nutrients, because you can do that, right? And for example, we didn't always have to supplement all the B vitamins, and they didn't all come from plants. They were produced in your gut. You've got a lot of microbes that will make plenty of B vitamins for you if you're feeding them the other things. And likewise, they'll make they can make serotonin, they can make acetylcholine, they can make all kinds of things. But if they're not there, they'll make other things you don't want, and that's the problem. But as we started selecting and sampling lots of healthy human poops, and we would go into very rural areas like ranches and farms and people that were already there. You look at them first, and they have a good diversity, and then we take that poop and we start isolating important organisms. And that was driven by research from the Microbiome Project, which is, there was a European and a States version, and they spent millions, hundreds of millions to try to understand our microbiome.
So why were you going into rural areas?
Because they're less exposed. So, and especially in Utah, we don't have big farms where they use glyphosates, and we have small communities that are socked into mountains, right? So they're very, And the water's, we can test the water. The water's clean. The soil's clean. It's never perfect because America burned leaded gasoline for half a century.
Oh, God.
Lead is everywhere. I don't care. I've tested samples from across the nation. Lead is in everything. And so you have to minimize that. But we did, and then we started finding, and then research would come out. So we used a lot of academic research from these groups in the microbiome world, isolating and finding which bugs are we missing and which bugs do these important, what we call keystone behaviors. And that's where you have a disproportionate value from an organism that lives in you that's small, right? He doesn't occupy a lot of space, but he does a disproportionate amount of work to keep you healthy. And that could be training your immune system. It could be creating antiparasitics, which your microbiome can do, and can be creating these compounds like urolithin A. Have you heard of that?
Nope.
It's a mitochondrial compound. So when you eat cranberry,
Okay.
or excuse me, not cranberry, when you eat pomegranate, there's something called elagitannins. Well, some of us, not all of us, now we have the microbes that do it, but some of us have these microbes that convert elagitannins into urolithin A. Urolithin A goes out and stimulates your mitochondria. And that's all been shown. So people start selling urolithin A, and I have it in one of the upcoming products, but what's better than that is you recolonize with bugs that make urolithin A when you eat elagitannins from
And
fruit.
I think we're always doing a disservice when we isolate something by itself
It can
instead
be-
of finding it how it's supposed to be in nature with all the compounds that it comes
No.
with. And we're like,
The
"We
clinical
just want
side of my
this."
brain likes that approach to just kickstart it, right?
Yeah.
The mechanic side of me, when my motor won't start in an old car, I use a little fluid to get it turned
Get it
over.
going.
But then after that, you figure out what was going on with that motor.
Yeah.
So it's okay as a kickstart, but yeah, we want to get to the root
Long-term.
cause long term, because a healthy microbiome will make 80% of the small molecules circulating in your blood, either benefiting you or hurting you, come from your microbes. They're not made by your own cells. When you try to detox, if those head into a colon that's full of unhealthy microbes, it will convert those back into toxins and push them back into the bloodstream. So a detox can actually work against you if your microbes are just re-injecting them into your bloodstream, as opposed to grabbing them and pushing them out. Like there's microbes that bind lead now. So as you're trying to detox with lead using a binder or a chelator, if you've got the wrong microbiome, you're going to fail. Whereas if you have the right, it'll continue that journey out of your body through the bile acids. And
So the mouth is obviously the beginning of our digestive
Indeed.
tract. And so some people will say all disease starts in the gut. Some people say, like, you'll have biological dentists that say everything starts in the mouth. So what's your thought? And obviously we know root canals are bad and
Yeah.
all the things. So do you see fixing the gut helping the oral microbiome, vice versa? Do they need to be attacked together, or?
together, which is why I have a mouth one coming out.
Okay.
Same reason, because we've done a lot of research on the mouth now. And for example, the fusobacterium, that's been implicated in heart disease. And it can be a resident of the mouth even though we don't want it there, right? It's a pathogen, or what we call an opportunistic pathogen. It's kept in check by a good oral microbiome, even if you carry it. But once you do something like use an alcoholic mouthwash, or you do something wrong, it can grow and create havoc, right? Gingivitis and so on. So just that one in particular, we know, and there are other players in here, that you swallow about 43 trillion organisms a day from your mouth, just
Wow.
through saliva. If they're not healthy, if this isn't healthy, you're creating opportunity for these guys to get down into the small intestine and large intestine and colonize. Once they do, now you've got a toxic organism living in your colon. And then if there's a leaky gut, because it's contributing to that, it's going to migrate into the bloodstream, find itself on a heart valve, and now we've got real serious problems. And there's examples of that in the liver. So that's the only one that's been allowed to be said because it's been connected. But we're going to find more of these incidences happening. So
Just hasn't
oral
come out yet.
is critical. And it's actually critical for the gut health, because if you're swallowing a lot of potentially pathogenic organisms, these guys down here are in a constant fight. They're in a constant battle in that ecosystem to keep them at bay. Whenever we get exposed to a pathogen like a bacteria, virus, or a parasite, including mold and yeast, these guys do the fight first. And if they're not healthy, they're going to lose that fight. And that's why you've probably heard of this, but in the United States, we have parasites, but they're sequestered. So if you're immune competent, then, and you've been exposed to Giardia, strongyloides, any of these, you can be a carrier, and your immune system and your microbiome are keeping that at bay. Even if it's still there. And this has happened a couple times in hospitals where someone comes in and they have an inflammatory response. They get a shot of corticosteroids, to reduce inflammation. And then within a week or two, they now have a parasitic infection. It was there.
Yeah.
It just was being controlled by the immune system, which is what you'd expect, right? That's how it happens in South America and Asia. I mean, we've been exposed to these things for thousands of years. Mm-hmm. It's not surprising we've developed an innate way to deal with it. When we mess with our innate way to deal with things, we run into trouble.
So it's interesting what you said about the heart. So I had a client, it's been about a year ago. She went in and they gave her an antibiotic and pulled a tooth. Mm-hmm. And her blood sugar or her blood pressure shot through the roof. Mm. So I'm like, I don't know if obviously the tooth was infected. So was it bacteria they set loose? Was it the antibiotics? Yeah. But it took us about 6 weeks
to bring it down,
to get her blood pressure back down to normal. It was like, It was always normal, like 120/80. And it was running like 160, 170. Like
so
crazy.
Chances are there was an infection, the inflammation that was released. And then, of course, all of the immune system went into high gear and drove up blood pressure, because that's partly controlled by our vagal nerve response. And certainly it triggered all of that.
So how do the clear products work differently
let's get
than
into
like
that.
a typical parasite cleanse?
Brilliant at tangents. So how we do that is, as we've been doing our research, and we constantly update it, just to keep in mind. So I'm going to tell you the most current, and we're always updating. So the Clear 1 and Clear 2 are a additional add-on to the number 3, 4, and the VRMs and the VIVI. So they're the next generation, in the sense that I left these alone because they have all their therapeutic value. But I went after what are the other countries doing for things like viruses, parasites, and bacteria. And so we searched globally for the research, the clinical research, and some of it was in the States, to keep in mind, but those were the ingredients that I included at doses. So, for example, you've probably heard of sweet wormwood oil.
Oh, yeah.
And artemisinin. Mm-hmm. I made sure to put that in there at the level that's being used for the therapeutic value of parasites. Now, it doesn't work against all of them, but it does against some of the single cellular ones, the protozoa, just not the helminths. Although it still is very obnoxious to some of these things, even though, because sometimes you just want to scare them out.
Yeah.
You don't necessarily kill them, but you're telling them you don't belong here.
Yeah.
There's that piece. There's antivirals. There's antifungals, because mold is a big issue. And that's like you say, that's the starting point to get things cleaned. But then the next phases are, we have a roadmap now that we're developing for the phases for simplicity for clients, for the patients. But if a practitioner wants to do their own kind of protocoling, you can look at that. We start off with certain nutritive formulas you can choose both systemic and or the Alimentum, called the Genic line.
Okay.
Those are the nutrient targeting formulas, and then the eubiomics and superfoods. I start always off with Terra.
That's on my list of things to ask you about, the Terra food.
I always start off with Terra because it's it's a unique, what we call soil-based organisms. Now, these are bacillus species, and oftentimes we used to get them, and we have a relationship with these species because of our desire to grow our own food, harvest off trees, plants, out of the soil. And that's where they live. So if I sample soil, I'll find bacillus. They're good at producing antibiotics. They're good at transiently improving our ecosystem in the gut. And even topically, I use sometimes for people that have some problems topically or in the nasal and that. The Terra is all of these really unique bacillus, some more clinically studied, some in Asia. That's the first approach to gut health, because you don't get that same response if you're a sensitive person that has a wrecked gut, you have food sensitivities, when you try new things you bloat, or you find that, Terra doesn't do that. And Terra Superfood is all of these whole food, just basically freeze-dried whole foods.
And I remember when I looked at it originally, I sent it to a friend of mine that does some cancer research and stuff, and it had a lot of good beneficial stuff in there
Yeah.
for like cancer prevention and
Yes.
stuff. And so I don't remember exactly what the ingredients were, but I sent it to him and I was
Yeah.
like, hey,
The
you need to
brassicas,
look
a
at
lot
this.
of the brassicas, so the
Yeah.
sulforaphanes and that. Yeah, so that is the first attempt because it's so much more gentle and it allows the unhealthy microbiome to adapt. Oftentimes, if you jump someone straight into a strong probiotic and a strong prebiotic, their body rebels because they're not, the guys down here don't want that. They want the simple carbs, they want processed foods, they want all
I
these
always
things.
tell people when they come
Yeah.
in, I'm like, if you're on a probiotic, stop taking it
Yeah.
right now because you're feeding all the bad guys.
And so, and our probiotics are so incredibly different in our prebiotics from anybody else out there because they have there are at least 3 or 4 to 6 what we call keystone species, and no one else has those. We
Talk about the
exclusively have
immune
these keystones.
eubiomic and just the information I've gotten from Hayden about how that, and he sent me a whole paper that I read. That's why we're giving it to a lot of our little like newborns right when they're
Yeah.
coming out, and our moms that are like, I have to take my kid to daycare or they're going back to school and I'm worried they're going to get sick, and we're like, give them this. So talk a little bit
So
about
the
what's
immune
in there.
biomic, it was designed around all the research done as regards to these organisms and their benefit to the immune system, how they teach and educate our immune system and protect us, right? So they stimulate T regulatory cells, they reduce autoimmune type reactions, they reduce allergic reactions. We want to control the immune system. It's not even control. We want to teach it to behave like it should.
Yeah.
And because it is an innate tool that keeps us thriving on the
It needs to
planet.
adapt.
If you didn't have it, you're a wreck, right? We know what that looks like, autoimmune and crises. And this is where immune comes in. And then, of course, I always tell people this. Now, I say this knowing that it's the right way, but it sometimes can get expensive for patients. And that is, we have to get you through all of them because the diversity isn't created. There's a certain amount of diversity created from, like, say, immune biomic and immune superfood. But it certainly doesn't approach the level that we need. So that's why I move people into the neuro, then into the skin, and then into the hormone eubiomic and so on. Because they all add to the diversity because our keystone are human-based. Unlike most all the other probiotics, unless it's the Akkermansia you've seen recently.
I was going to ask you about that.
That is what we call a commensal or a symbiotic organism that lives in us.
Okay.
And I can find it in people. So that's the difference between what we call a next-gen probiotic, where it's meant to live there. Every other probiotic you see, including the SBOs, we love them, but they temporarily go through you. All of the fermented foods, which I absolutely would add to the protocol, by the way, they help encourage that diversity. So fermented foods, but they have to be real. There's a lot of fake fermented foods out there. Yeah, I've been testing them lately, and there's horrible yogurts, horrible kefir. I mean, they're just, when you buy at the grocery store, it's a crapshoot. But so if you can do it yourself, so these keystone next gen probiotics, they're meant to live in you. So when you eat them, and we've done a couple of case studies, and one's coming out on the Metabo eubiomic.
Okay.
We just finished. We gathered 30 people and collected their poo many times. But the ones we've done before that, we did one on immune and neuro. What we find is the organisms that we're feeding that are meant to be in humans, they came from humans, they show up in the humans and they stay there for months to years, right? We've kind of carried out some people what we call it, long term. Mm-hmm. And because they're supposed to be there, they were destroyed from generational bad behavior, antibiotic usage, and so on.
So they're supposed to be there, but most of the time we don't have them.
We don't have a lot of them. And so we're bringing back those.
Okay.
Now, there are others, like a lot of the lactobacilli and a lot of the bifido. Some of them are what we call commensal. They're supposed to be there. But others are transient, but they're still beneficial.
Okay.
They still do a job, but they don't stay there for more than like 30 days.
Okay.
After you quit taking them. But they still have a benefit.
Okay.
And so we've mixed both the next gen and let's say, the more transient that have clinical benefit. Those were our formulas are made out of. So not only did we do research in our own facility on the next gen, we partnered with probiotic companies that are doing human-based lactose. So anything else outside of that is essentially fermenting lactose. Lactobacillus and bifido that are used in cheese making, wine making, sourdough bread making, kefir, though, which again, there's benefits, but they're not meant to survive inside of you.
Okay.
They do a job, but it's a temporary job.
What do you see is the biggest mistake that people are making when they're trying to fix their gut?
Yeah.
I mean, I have a lot, but I
Yeah, a
don't
lot,
do
me too. So one of the biggest things is they want a quick fix, and they want either a probiotic or a supplement to give them that fix. So that's why I start with the Terra, because they want to jump into this. I feel better. I have a more consistent bowel movement. I don't bloat when I eat certain foods. It's a multi-pronged approach when it comes to people that are really wrecked. So I guess there's also a spectrum of these people. So I would like to say that the ones that are low-hanging fruit, where they just have maybe one or two problems, we can get those guys feeling better really quickly with Terra, followed up by dietary recommendations, and then staying consistent. Whereas the wrecked ones, it's you start here, but keep in mind this is a many-month journey. We'll get you there, but we've got to deal with your diet. We got to deal with the lack of microbes. We got to deal with the lack of your immune system functioning, and all your allergies or your food sensitivities.
Tight
because the goal
junctions
is to titrate those away. We don't have to have allergies. That's a modern catastrophe. That's not an ancient catastrophe. Unless you're born with a genetic celiac. Allergies are new, and they're already being reversed in places like Europe. They're microdosing, and they're changing their gut microbiome.
Microdosing.
Yeah, microdosing the allergen, and they're adding probiotics and prebiotics, and slowly increasing their dietary diversity, and they're reversing allergies.
So the microdosing, even taking that a step a little less, they're doing like homeopathy type. So that's what I always tell people, like an allergy shot. You go to an allergist, they're microdosing you.
Yeah.
But from a chemical standpoint, you can do this with homeopathy in a much safer way, and your body actually responds quicker.
And I would add to that the microbe too, because one of the reasons allergy exists is one, leaky gut, which means your microbiome is broken. Two, the microbes will transform all these things that end up becoming a toxin in the bloodstream, or what we call an antigen, something your body develops an immune response to. And there's been a number of clinical studies where they've looked at gluten, for example. Yeah. Why is gluten such a problem? Well, there's a certain bug that will turn gluten into a toxin that then the body recognizes. So if you've got the wrong microbiome, you can actually be stimulating your allergen instead of reducing it through this process. So there's a lot of complexity. So I take them through the journey of all of these steps, from the probiotic to the prebiotics and onward into the more herbal supplements, to help drive this rebuilding of the entire gut.
When you have someone working on the gut and they have a food sensitivity, how long do you see research-wise before that, if they completely remove it, can they reintroduce it usually without a problem?
Usually within 60 days. Small dose.
I usually say 3 months, just because.
And it's still safe.
Yeah,
but then you start with small doses, and you find that, because if you don't rebuild back the first digestive organisms, then you're gonna have a relapse. And so and you can actually see it it actually can happen really quickly if you do probiotics, prebiotics, and add fermented foods, good fermented foods. You can cut that back even in less than 60 days, because a lot of the fermenting organisms will help you metabolize these things that are causing problems.
Okay.
Because that's what you do. You've grown them on plants, right? Whether it be kefir, sauerkraut, pickles, and so on. They have the enzymes to break it down where we don't.
How do you see? I have to be careful. So all the shots that kids are getting, how do you see that affecting their microbiome?
That's actually been shown. So if your listeners just want to do their own research after this, they can find it. So two things happened. We've been watching scientifically vaccinations, right? And I know we're not supposed to have, but I'm being real. So what they've shown, and they've shown this in Asia, in China, in Europe, that a unhealthy microbiome, when you give an immune shot like that, if you have an unhealthy microbiome in dysbiosis, you get no immune response, which means you don't get any benefit from it.
Nothing happening.
Nothing. And that's been shown over and over again. So there's a good argument to have the microbiome processing properly. Secondly, when you look at healthy microbiome people, they require a lot less intervention when it comes to these things, because the microbes, including the viruses that live in us, right? We have protective viruses.
Yeah.
No one talks about that. We think of them as scary. We think of bacteria as scary, fungi as scary. No, there are so many in here.
Yeah.
Trillions that are helping us. Well, if they're there, they do the work that we don't need to do. They do the defense. They do the immune stimulation. They do all of that work for us, and then we don't need the interventions we need. Oftentimes, the reason we're here, you and I, is because we have this crisis with chronic issues, but we got ourselves here, right? It wasn't just we woke up one day and said, "Oh my goodness, we broke everything." No, we've brought this, and we can go back to where we want to be. It's just going to take some time.
So there was a study, and I've posted about this several times, but there was a study that showed every dose of antibiotics you give to a child raises their risk of childhood cancer. And their explanation was bacteria are nature's natural biodegraders, and they're coming in to clean up inflammation or some kind of injury, or they have a job to do. And we think bacteria is bad. They're coming in to clean something up. You give an antibiotic, you wipe it out. That injury, that inflammation, that area still remains inflamed or injured, and you've wiped out the body's cleanup system. And so then it's turning in. That's why they're saying these cancers are developing, because you're continuing to wipe out the microbiome, which is the immune system. Then the body's alarm system's off. They've got this injured or inflammatory areas, and then they develop cancer.
Yeah. So it's a leap, but what we know about that process. So the aphorism, all disease begins in the gut, that's real, right? That can no longer be debated, because that gut X is connected it to everything. And there's a lot of animal studies where you remove things and you get a problem, right?
Yep.
We can see that. Humans is a little more complex, and you've got to be more ethical. You can't just start removing things out of humans. But we're seeing the writing on the wall, so to speak. And I think where that article is kind of it's prophetic, in where some of them are absolutely going to be connected to what these microbes are doing, because these microbes, you're right, you have about 23,000 genes that do the work for you, that make up who you are. Now there's other ones that do structural things like build your bones, but you have about 23,000 that are dedicated to you uniquely, and I have the same, right? And then epigenetics controls a lot of the differences about hair color and height and all those things. But that's 23,000 genes in your DNA that kind of makes you who you are. The microbes in your gut, there's over 1 million genes doing work for you.
That's wild.
If you remove those, which include detox, getting rid of, and they're actually now getting rid of plastics, right? Our microbes they're adapting more quickly to this horrible new world than we are, right? And they can. That's their.
Yeah.
You can take a microbe and grow it over a few times, and it'll live in a hot pot or live at the bottom of the ocean on a meteorite, right? They can live anywhere. There's some that are now living where Chernobyl was, where radiation is out of control.
Yeah.
You can find microbes, but you can't find anything else, right? Everything else is dead, but microbes can adapt. So they're very good. That's why we have them. They can adapt to change really quickly. But when you create an environment where you're right, it becomes, the immune system's broken, your inflammation is off the charts, tissue is being damaged, DNA is being damaged, your outcome is what they're suggesting. Viruses have been known to do that. Bacteria have been known to do that. We know chemicals have been known to do that. But they take the same journey, right? That it can be a different source, but to get to what you're saying, yes, that can happen. And the closer we look and the more we study, the more we're going to find.
That's awesome. Is there anything else that you can think of to add? I feel like we've talked about so much.
We did. I hope we didn't go in so many different directions. People are like, come on.
Most people that are listening are already down the rabbit hole.
Okay,
so.
Good. Because I do like to summarize. And I guess in summary, I love the botanical piece. I love the phytonutrients, the nutrients themselves, the genetics of who we are, what makes us unique, and our epigenetics. These are all part of our system. But right now, I'm absolutely fascinated by how the microbiome can set us up to make all these other things work. And, case in point, when you set up the microbiome of a baby, when mom and baby set it up properly, you're setting that baby up for a very healthy life.
Yeah.
And that's critical, right? That's critical. We're doing a lot of going backwards in time, like even for my own body, I'm going back and fortunately I grew up with, with my grandfather and my mom,
pretty healthy.
all very, I would take Sprouts to school.
Were you even
before
vaccinated
Sprouts
as a kid?
No.
Yeah, I didn't figure.
I would take Sprouts to school and people were like, ew,
what
are
is
those
that?
hairy things you're eating? You're disgusting. So I did have some advantages, but the other ways, I've been exposed to a lot of toxins and, I'm working on it as well.
Yeah.
And my microbiome needs work. There's just no question.
And I think, talking about the microbiome, you're familiar with Pottinger's cat study.
Yes.
So I always tell everybody, I'm like, go look it up on YouTube. It's like a real creepy black and white old 10-minute video. But, I mean, all he did was divide up the cats, and the only thing he fed differently was their diet. And the ones that got the raw meat and raw dairy developed normally. The ones who got processed and cooked and no nutrients in their food, they had digestive issues. They were aggressive towards each other, which we know most of your dopamine, serotonin's made in the gut. So they got aggressive. It changed the shape of their face. They had poor dentation. They became sterile. And the only difference was what they were eating, which of course is going to affect their microbiome. So it affects everything.
And that's true for us. That's why we have so many, our journey is a little bit longer, because we know that everybody is going to benefit from each piece, but some benefit more from this step than this step.
Yeah.
And, one size doesn't fit all. So we have that dynamic to allow that journey to happen. And that's why it's taken us so long to really come to market. Some people have come to market so quickly with the probiotic. It's like, no, that's garbage. And I've seen a lot of garbage lately. Yeah. And that's my frustration, is that when you say probiotic, prebiotic, microbiome, the world at large goes, ooh, that's really cool. No. Because if you don't feel better, then we failed. And now I have to continue to tell the story to get you better when you failed because you didn't do the right thing. And we know what the right thing is. Yeah.
Quality matters. That's what I tell people. I'm like,
so
I vet every company that I carry, because if you're buying it from Walmart or Walgreens, it's probably garbage. So
if you can ever come visit me, I'll take you to the lab. That's where all the nerdy people are. It's our
We've talked. How far are you from
facility.
Zion? Because we want to go there.
About 5 hours.
Oh, that's
We're
not
north.
bad. That's
We're
not
north
bad.
of
Okay.
Zion,
We can make a trip then.
We're up more towards like Park City, Salt Lake, Ogden.
All right. Well,
but
thank you. I feel like this was really good, and I feel like it'll help a lot of people. It taught me a lot. So
good. Yeah. Thanks for having me. It's fun.